The flood threat is not over in New South Wales. There is still major flooding happening right now on the Clarence River in the Grafton area north of Coffs Harbour and inland at Moree, just south of the Queensland border. The Moree River there is expected to peak this morning with major flooding. For other parts of New South Wales, the floodwaters are receding. Some residents are being allowed back in to check out the damage and start the process of cleaning up. Here's the New South Wales Premier, Gladys Berejiklian.
Believe that most river systems have peaked. However, complacency is a concern for us. We need to make sure that everybody stays out of floodwaters. The currents are very strong, the flows are still very strong, and unpredictable flows will continue to occur in communities which haven't seen this amount of rainfall for up to 50 or 100 years. So it's really important for everybody to stay safe and make sure they stay out of these water systems. As a result, 3,000 people were able to return to their homes yesterday, but we still have 20,000 people who are technically evacuated and haven't been able to return to their homes yet. The number of people on evacuation watch hasn't changed, so there are literally tens of thousands of people on alerts. However, we are hoping that by the end of the day that number will reduce as well. I want to stress to communities, no matter where you are, that if you have been allowed to return, you can be rest assured that our teams are in place to support you in the clean-up efforts.
New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian speaking there just in the last hour or so. And we've got reporter Ruby Cornish in Windsor, that's just on Sydney's northwest fringe, and Tim Swanston in Taree, that's about 350 k's north of Sydney. Ruby, to you first. There was that fatality yesterday not too far from where you are now.
G'day, Joe. Yeah, that's right. It was about 10 kilometres north east of here at Glenorrhea, a 25-year-old Pakistani national. Really sad story. He was on the first day of his new job. He was in a brand new hire car and he is suspected to have driven into floodwaters early in the morning when it was still dark. He called emergency services at about 6:30 and he was on the phone to them for about half an hour, but then they lost contact with him, and yesterday his body and that vehicle were recovered from floodwaters. So in response to this death, emergency services say that it's a good reminder, that it's really dangerous around here at the moment. Even as the floodwaters are receding in this part of the world, you can't drive into floodwaters. You need to take extra care, make sure we have no more injuries, no more fatalities in this region through this disaster.
And Ruby, what's happening in Windsor this morning now that the floodwaters have gone from the spot where you are?
Yeah, so I'm on Church Street in Windsor. Windsor's on the Hawkesbury, and this region was really hard hit, especially this end of Church Street. You can see next to me the river's come right up, and it's still right up. So normally from this point you can't even see the Hawkesbury River. There's a road down there that's still completely covered. So the floodwaters have a long way to go before they get down again. We still have some houses here whose backyards are inundated. But where the floodwaters have receded, you can see that it's left behind all this debris. A lot of cleanup's already happened here this morning. It's looking a lot better than it was. But there's just this green algae all over the road, household items, chairs, tables, logs, bits and pieces. People keep pointing things out to me saying, oh yeah, that's from my backyard. It's washed up next door or washed up onto the road. So, lots of people out and about this morning cleaning up. They've been saying that, they're a bit overwhelmed by how much there is to do, but it'll just be a big team effort in the days and weeks to come.
OK, let's head about 3 hours north now to Tim Swanston in Taree. Tim, what's it like where you are?
Morning, Joe. Well, that mammoth clean-up effort is well and truly underway. Not just homes, there were, hundreds of homes that were inundated in and around Taree, but of course infrastructure. Behind me is one of the corners of the main streets here in Taree, and it's just completely covered in mud. In fact, one of the buildings just over my shoulder here, apparently they had to get a bobcat in to clear out, a good metre of mud or so as the Manning River rose and flooded much of these low-lying areas here in Taree at the weekend. So there's been a lot of council activity involved with that massive clean-up effort. Households have been putting a lot of refuse out onto the street, things and items that they weren't able to save at the weekend. Waterlogged carpets they've been ripping up. So there's a huge clean-up effort still to go here. We have seen some boots on the ground, albeit only two so far, from the ADF. We know that they're going to be involved in the clean-up effort here on the mid-north coast. first, but it does sound like it's going to be quite a considerable amount of time to come before people are able to really pick up the pieces of that massive flooding event at the weekend.
Yeah, and so some people are cleaning up, but there's major flooding still happening. Grafton is a fair way north of where you are now, but what can you tell us about what's happening in Grafton?
Yeah, it is a fair way north, but of course we do know that that system peaked there last night, so it is currently still at major flooding, some 6 metres or so, but it peaked overnight at about 6.5 metres, so we do know that there is still quite a considerable threat in that area, and no doubt the Premier has impressed that although, even though it's clear skies and some of these river systems have certainly eased, that there is still threat up in the north, downstream as well, looking at Maclean. In fact, they don't expect the Clarence to peak there until sometime this morning. So there's, of course, still concern across parts of the state.
And Tim, back in Taree, I hear you've been on a bit of a cow hunt.
Yeah, look, it was a pretty interesting afternoon with a fellow from Mondrook, Peter Bowie. He lost about 200 cattle over at the weekend as floodwaters swept them downstream. But he's been receiving some interesting calls in the last couple of days saying that cows have been turning up in some curious parts of town, some at the local school here in Taree. In fact, one ended up at the beach over at Old Bar. So some pretty wide-ranging places that the cows have ended up. And yesterday afternoon, he was finally able to get a horse float and a trailer and has been going around town trying to salvage some of the cows that he could. Here's what he told me yesterday afternoon.
Luckily, a lot of them are in places that people are happy to leave them there for a while. One man fell in love with one of the cows, so we told him he could have visitation rights. That's if the cow wants to go home. The way it's been treated down there, it may not want to come home. You don't know what this means to us. We're new to Taree and everyone's like this to us, and it's so good.
That's what we're here for. That's what Taree's all about.
I got a call off Mum. I was in town and she's like, there's a cow down our street. How long are you going to be? And we put him in an old lady's yard. He was enjoying eating the pumpkins, and yesterday we ended up moving him down to my place. A bit more feed for him, a bit more happier, a bit more room.
So perhaps a bit of a surprising love story out of the circumstances with the unexpected guest, but really just does go to show that sort of community spirit that rallies around in times like these.
I love that the fact that some of the cows were loving those pumpkins that they found in their temporary new homes. OK, Tim Swanson reporting there from Taree, and Ruby Cornish on the streets of Windsor on the northwestern fringe of Sydney. And floodwaters have begun spilling into the CBD of Moree in the northwest of New South Wales, splitting the town in two. So these pictures have only just come through this morning. The Mehi River is nearing its expected peak of 10.5 metres, and the State Emergency Services warned the water may take days to recede. We've heard that a couple of times over the last couple of days, that these waters in the floodwaters in the coastal areas generally go down pretty quickly, but inland it's a different story. And so you can see from those shots we've received there this morning that there is already water through significant parts of town, and we'll be chatting to, we'll endeavour to chat to some people in Moree through today to find out how they're going there. Investigations are continuing into the death of a man in a flooded Gold Coast hinterland creek. Reporter Dominic Cansdale joins us now from the Gold Coast. So Dominic, what can you tell us?
Father of three, 38-year-old David Hornman was reported missing on Monday after failing to turn up for a shift at work. His family posted very emotional appeals for help on social media, and police followed with a formal appeal for assistance on Tuesday afternoon. Unfortunately, yesterday afternoon, a member of the public spotted Mr. Hornman's overturned ute semi-submerged in what was still a flooding Canungra Creek, and police divers later recovered that Mr. Hornman's body from that wreck shortly afterwards. Police believe Mr. Hornman was driving towards Tambourine Mountain during what were very treacherous weather conditions earlier this week. To give you an idea, about 500 mil of rain fell across the hinterland region since the weekend. So just an incredible amount of water and very dangerous conditions on road. But what's followed has been an outpouring of grief on social media. Mr. Hornman's mother posting last night, "Thank you for all your messages. I wish God had taken me instead. Rest in peace, my beautiful son. You were the best." So a very sad time for this community.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about the weather there now?
Well, you wouldn't be able to tell that we were just coming out of a massive rain event from the weather today. The sky's blue. I don't think I see a single cloud, but the cleanup does continue. Flood warnings remain in place for Logan and Albert rivers, which are a bit further north from the main bulk of the Gold Coast. But there is still a significant amount of debris scattered across the hinterland regions, which has many often fast-flowing creeks and rivers all throughout that area. But really, in the past few days, I think the community is really just reminded how much they need to take care on the roads during these flood events, which locals will tell you is only a matter of time before it happens again.
Okay, Dominic Kensdale reporting there from the Gold Coast. Time now for a check of the weather. It's a very good morning to Nate Byrne. Nate, g'day. So there was more than a metre of rain in parts of New South Wales as that system hit the state over the last several days. It's gone out to sea now, but the tail of that system kind of thing is hitting Tassie at the moment. How wild is it in Tassie and how much rain has fallen there so far?
Joe, we've seen to 9 a.m. this morning just shy of 300 millimetres. But when I say just shy, we're talking about 280 sort of area. That's at a place called Grey, just east of Fingal in the east of Tasmania there. You can see plenty of clouds still associated with that low pressure system. It's been very slowly moving southwards, but you're right, further north, completely clear skies. In fact, the Bureau yesterday cancelled all of the flood watches in the southeast of Queensland and across New South Wales. That doesn't mean the floods are over yet, though. It just means that we're not expecting any extra flooding to happen. But they've also started to finalise the flood warnings. That's the individual warnings for each of the rivers, which is good news. And we heard earlier this morning that it looks like we've passed all of the peaks. Doesn't mean that there's no danger, though. Still plenty of water on the ground.
There's one or two spots still to get their peaks as well.
For the most part, though, things are easing off for now, which is great. For Tasmania, though, there's still lots of wet weather around. We're seeing some heavy falls this morning, and we've also got road weather alerts across large parts of the state. We will see a little bit of wet weather pushing back into New South Wales today, Joe, into the southeast of the state. Some showers, that sort of thing, the odd storm as well, but not anywhere near as much rain as what we've seen in recent days, that's for sure.
So what are the warnings today?
For Tasmania, we've got warnings on at the moment through the southeast for heavy rainfall that could lead to flash flooding. Also for damaging surf conditions because the winds have been up quite a bit as well. Hobart's certainly very, very wet this morning. Now, good news though is that wet weather is easing today. So as we move through into the afternoon, we should see those warnings come off. And then after that, other than the odd frontal system moving through the southeast over the coming days, we don't really have much wet weather at all. So it really does look like this intense weather system is finally going to be finished by the end of today. Still a bit of a wild morning to get through for Tasmania.